director of the PGA-nominated Lady Bird, Greta Gerwig. Giving me too many, these are too many things for one person to remember.
No, it sounds very, very impressive when you say it all like that. It's very moving.
Well,
very
good. Thank you for doing this. And I think to begin with, how long is this a story that you've thought about telling? And when you were writing it, did you always hope to direct it?
Well, it's hard to know. I've been a writer in different ways for a very long time, and when I was in college, I wrote a lot of plays, and then after college, I was in love with movies and cinema, and I started working on films, and then I co-wrote a couple of movies. I wrote most. Notably Frances Ha and Mistress America with Noah Baumbach, and I think I started writing this script sometime after we finished Mistress America, but the act of writing and the process of writing has been something that I'm just always doing in some way. I think it's maybe how I filter the world. But I had a hunch that I wanted to make a movie that took place in Sacramento, and I wanted to make a movie that had a mother-daughter story at the center of it. But other than that, I didn't know what it was going to be exactly, and that's how I tend to work. I write to find out what it is.
So there's no outline or anything?
No, I don't outline. I've tried to outline, and I find that if I outline before I write, for me, it somehow the whole thing becomes kind of dead and not that interesting. I do outline after I've written, after I have a lot of material and characters. Then I kind of go through this process of what would be more of like an outline. But yeah, it comes after the writing. I kind of have to get through the whole thing.
So how long from start to finish did this one, for instance, take?
I think, a couple of years. I mean, not of solid writing. I'd be writing and then stepping away from it. I know that there was a draft on my computer at the end of 2013 that was 350 pages long, and it was called Mothers and Daughters, and it was really boring. But then the year after that, I honed it. I made it what it is. I made it into this movie, and then.
Well, let's talk about how do you. So you're dealing with that massive amount of material.
Yeah.
How do you winnow it down to what it needs to be? Did you show it to somebody when it was in that form?
No. Nobody had to do that. That's just mean to the person to give them that much to read. Well, it's kind of a lot of it is. This is such a silly metaphor, but it actually is the closest one I've come to that makes sense to me. How many people remember magic eye paintings from the 90s? Do you know what I'm talking about? Where it's like a pattern that looks like it's all the same, and then you stare at it for long enough and a dolphin comes out at you?
Yeah.
Yes, that's sort of what writing feels like to me. It's like a giant mess, and then there's a dolphin. It's almost like, I don't know, I think I try to, in as much as possible, allow myself to kind of be free and let my unconscious go. And I think a lot of what I end up doing is, I'll find that I've written like 5 of the exact same scene. And it's like, I'm just circling the same topic again and again. And it's like, okay, so you only need 1 of those. And then it's kind of like picking and choosing and telling myself I can put stuff back in if I miss it, and and then building the connective tissue in between things. And a lot of it is like pulling threads through, because I like movies that seem like the scenes are just unfolding in front of you, and then you realize maybe at the midway point that they're all catching under you. And that just, it's almost like, it feels like a physical act of weaving something.
Just a couple of quick fun fact questions. Where do you write?
Well, I wish there was just one answer to this. When I first started writing a lot, I don't know, I think this is probably pretty common for people who are writers or actors, like, but when I first started writing, it was always what I wasn't supposed to be doing. Like when I was in high school and college, because I didn't major in writing. I majored in English and philosophy, but like I wasn't supposed to be writing plays. So it was always this kind of like thing I would do when I was supposed to be studying for something else. And then when I started acting a lot, I would do a lot of writing in makeup trailers, because it also created this feeling of like I was cheating on the real thing with this other thing. And it took a long time for me to sort of like take the space for it, even literally. I spent a lot of time, I liked writing, I like writing on the subway, I like writing in public libraries, I like writing in parks, I like writing on the move. I like feeling like I'm stealing it from the world, which, yeah, it's just how I've been. But then what I did ultimately is I went to a place in upstate New York, a place called Cold Spring, New York. I chose it because it was right off the Metro North, so I could take the train up there and then walk from the train station, so I wouldn't have to have a car, so I'd be totally isolated. It was in the middle of the winter. Wow. And I like
That's
finished
where this
it.
one was. Yeah.
Yes, I was the only guest at a bed and breakfast.
That's great.
And the proprietor was like, "You have to sign up for breakfast." And I was like, "I'm the only one here." And they were having a stink bug invasion while I was there.
Wow.
All the stink bugs were coming in because it was so cold. And then he was like, "Well, I can put you in the room downstairs that has fewer stink bugs." And I was like, "Excellent."
Appreciate it. Yeah.
So that was how that I don't know. This is a very long answer, but I mean, there's writers in this room, so I feel like you understand. Somebody had suggested to me, "Oh, you should go to one of those writers' colonies." But I just couldn't do that because I know there's other people there that I'd want to talk to, and that we're all supposed to have dinner together at the end of the day. And I was like, no, I would never get anything done. I'd just be thinking about dinner.
Right.
I'm a distractible person,
Okay.
so.
On what do you write?
Oh, I write everything. I write longhand, but I also have a typewriter and I have a computer. So I sort of shuttle back and forth between all three. Eventually it has to get on the computer, but I find that final draft is sometimes a trap because it makes you look like you're done before you're done, because it looks like a script,
Right.
and you can feel sort of satisfied. So that's that.
How disciplined are you when you sit down to write? Is it like, all right, I'm going to do 9 till 11 and 2 to 5 or whatever? Or you just, do you like, some people like distractions, I don't know.
Yeah, no, I will say I've written a lot of like rules for myself that then do not get followed.
Right.
I'll set, yeah, I have, I think, I do everything I possibly can before I do it. But then I'll have, states of euphoria while I'm writing and it's amazing, and then I immediately get embarrassed by what I've just written. It's kind of going back and forth, those two things. I wish I was talking to the great writer, Peter Morgan, the other day, and he wakes up every morning and just writes. And he writes he'll write between like an hour and 5 hours. And he does it every day. He says he's useless after noon, but he does it every day. And I was like, I hate you.
That's the only way to turn out a limited series.
But I know. But also,
series, yeah.
I think probably that's the right way to go about it.
Yeah.
It's just, it's difficult to be that disciplined. But yeah, I mean, along the way, I've gotten it done. But
born and raised in Sacramento, educated in Catholic school, dated boys who turned out to be gay, wound up going on to a top East Coast college. All these things are true of Lady Bird and of Greta Gerwig.
yeah.
Is Lady Bird Greta Gerwig?
You know, actually, it's funny. Like, I mean, obviously, I went to Catholic high school, and all those things you say are true. I didn't stop dating boys that turned out to be gay. That went on for quite a while. But who Lady Bird is, like who her essential sort of soul is actually kind of like the opposite of how I was. I was, I mean, I never made anyone call me by a different name. I didn't dye my hair bright red. I wasn't a rebel. I was very much like a rule follower and a people pleaser. And I think in some ways when I was writing this character, it was like a way to explore someone who was braver than I could have been, and that I admired. Even though she's flawed, she's sort of a heroine for me. And I think one of the things when I started working with Saoirse Ronan on the part, I think we both saw someone that we wish we could have been. I think Saoirse very much related to who I actually was. Like that we were both, we were both very gold star getting kids, and there's something about her willingness to just fling herself at her desires and to say outrageous things that we both thought, oh, I wish I had been able to do that.
Well, she didn't even, I don't think she had a conventional high school life at all, because she was by that point already an Oscar-nominated actress at 13, right?
Right. No, she didn't. She went to high school, she calls it secondary school for a little bit, but then she didn't go to high school, and obviously she's Irish, and but she related to it in this very deep way, like from her heart, and then she later told me, she was like, well, I knew all about high school in America because of Saved by the Bell.
One of your major influences on this film.
That's all you need to know.
Right. So who had to believe in this for you to get the chance to direct solo for the first time?
Well, the first person that I went to was actually my manager, Evelyn O'Neill, who produced the movie with me, and she'd gone to film school at UCLA, and then she became a manager later in her career, and she never produced, but she'd always wanted to, and I thought, well, I've never directed and you've never produced, but I think between the two of us we can figure this out. And then she and I took a lot of meetings with a lot of different financiers, and I had a lookbook, and I had my script, and I had everything ready to go. And I think it's what happens to a lot of people. It's all no until one person says yes. So it was a lot of just not finding the home, and then Scott Rudin heard that I had a script and asked to read it, and then it was very fast. I think he said yes within like 11 hours of reading it.
And what changes at that point? Because he doesn't mess around.
Well, I kept waiting for it not to be real, but essentially he just once he said yes, we'd love to make this. It's just then everything starts happening. That I was able to start, hiring a casting director and putting together this team, and the ball started rolling.
Did you have anybody for any of these parts in mind when you were writing this?
No, I hadn't had anyone in mind when I was writing.
So how did we come not only to Saoirse, who's obviously great, but also I don't know how Broadway continued without you, because this is like every great Broadway actor that there is, from Stephen McKinley Henderson and Lois Smith and on and on and on and on.
Yeah.
Tracy Letts.
Yeah.
So
Laurie. Yeah.
Laurie Metcalf. Yeah. You just. Are you? I mean, are you a huge Broadway buff, or how did this? Is just coincidental? What was the?
Yeah. Well, my first love was theater, and I spent a lot of time when I was in college. I did. Like I said, I was writing plays, but I also worked in. I did a lot of technical theater. I did like lights and sound, and I was a stage manager, and I loved going. And one of the things that I loved about New York was, in addition to the movie theaters, that introduced me to great films for the first time, like Anthology Film Archives and Film Forum and Museum of Moving Image. I was going to the theater all the time because a lot of theaters in New York have student discounts, and you can show up and it's $10 or $15, and you can see great theater. And I always promised myself if I ever had the ability to, I'd go to the theater every week and pay the premium ticket price. And so I've kept up. I still find theater to be such an inspirational place, both to watch writing and to watch actors, because there's nothing mediating your experience of the writing or of the actors. And so I wanted to put together a cast that of people that I just have admired for so long, and that I've always wanted to work with. And even Timothée Chalamet was in a play that I saw in New York. He was in a play by John Patrick Shanley, and he was amazing in it. And yeah, that's where I go. That's where I go.
Both for writing and directing, was there one scene that challenged you more than others that you stands out as you look back?
For writing, I would say that the scene that was. I always feel like the scenes for me that are hard to write are scenes where it's where I know I'm trying to get out information, and I'm trying to get out information in an elegant way. That's always it just takes some sleight of hand. But I do remember the scene when I'd gotten to the point in the script where Marion finds out that Lady Bird had applied to East Coast colleges, and I felt tired, because I was like, I don't want to write another giant fight. And I came at it a bunch of different ways. And then I'm not totally sure what it was, but I thought, what if she just goes silent? Or I think what I thought was, what's worse than fighting? Not fighting. That's worse. Because fighting shows some intimacy still. But I remember kind of struggling with how that moment should work. But then other parts come wholesale to me. Like I just like know that something's gonna happen. And then for directing, strangely and it's one of my most gratifying moments of directing. And this is an actor related thing. I mean, there's all kinds of things with directing, like timing and light and getting everything right, but for me there was when Lucas playing Danny and Saoirse, when they kissed for the first time outside of the dance, there was something wrong with the scene, and we couldn't figure it out, and they're both such great actors, and I couldn't figure out why it was awkward and why it wasn't working. And then we stopped, and I took Lucas for a walk, and we talked for a second, and then I came back and I took Saoirse for a walk, and then we sort of all collectively had this realization, because I wanted it to be romantic. I didn't want the fact that he ultimately is not attracted to women to be something that undercuts the romance of that moment. I wanted it to be like, no, it's just as romantic. But what I wasn't doing was I was making them play it almost more adult, and what was beautiful about it, and what ended up being so romantic about it, was that in a way it's almost like the last moment of childhood, And as soon as I gave them the direction to do it like children, it became romantic. It became everything I hoped it would be. But it was something that, those moments are the most valuable when you're like, I can't figure it out, and then you're all trying to work it out together.
This movie, I think, was unveiled for the first time at the Telluride Film Festival back on Labor Day weekend. And the way I guess you'd already maybe done some family and friends type screenings, but you said there that every time you introduced it, you get very emotional, and I think that continued for a while. And just can you pinpoint why that is? I mean, obviously it's the whole thing is a big ordeal, but what's that about?
I think it's just sharing art with people is it's vulnerable. I mean, I've had it as an actor, and now I've had it as a writer-director. I've had it as a writer before. It just, it goes beyond wanting people to think like it's good. There's another thing where you feel like, that's, it's like having like love letters read in public or something, and I think it was an overwhelming moment. Also, I think for me, because I'd wanted to be a writer-director for so long, and then to be at Telluride at that moment, and actually Barry Jenkins had just introduced the film, which was also very emotional because I've known him since I was like 22 years old, and
he'd had a little movie there the year before.
Yeah.
So
and what he's done is so incredible. I mean, the whole thing just felt, and my parents were sitting in the audience. They'd seen the movie before, but they were there with me, and but yeah, the moment, I still kind of can't get over when people come up to me and they say, "Oh, I saw it and it meant something to me." That continues to make me feel very moved.
Well, so just as the last question, the movie does, after all the festivals and whatever, goes out into the world. Not every movie gets described as quote-unquote perfect by the New York Times, or gets 100% on Rotten Tomatoes until some asshole decides to, just for the hell of it, to knock that off, or gets recognized by every guild except, I think, the Visual Effects Society, which doesn't really apply here. So just, to have, you've been in this time of year before as solely a writer, but to now be recognized by the DGA on top of the WGA and all these other things, where I guess just this moment, forget about, when it was first going on in the world, this moment where it's now couldn't be more appreciated. How does that feel? And where do you go from here? Are you going to still be acting as well, or is it going to be just writing and directing?
Well, I mean, first of all, I have to say, I mean, I'm beyond honored that particularly the guilds, for me, because it's peers, it means so much. And I love movies. I love people who make movies. I love people who invest their time and talents in storytelling, and to be honored by that group of people is just the most moved I've been. And I think, and also for all the people, like, my editor was nominated, and my costume designer, and my production designer, and I know how much every single person put their heart and soul into it, and especially on little movies, independent movies, it's all for the love, and it makes me so happy that the work they did was recognized. And then in terms of where I go from here, I love acting and I want to keep acting, but because it's so much of who I am as a writer and as a director. But I think when I was on set, it's kind of far and away the happiest I've ever been is making a movie. So I think I've got a lot of movies I want to make, and someone, so I gotta keep going, because you only have so many. I mean, you know, somebody said you make all your best movies between 30 and 60. So the clock's ticking. But they said before 30 you're imitating other people. After 60 you're imitating yourself.
Well, we'll find out.
I don't know if that's true. I'm just saying.
Well, congratulations and thank you for
Thank
doing
you.
this.
Thank you.